Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee of Wokingham Borough Council, today, Wednesday, the 14th of July, 2021. This is a hybrid meeting, so some people are present with me in the chamber here and others are participating remotely by using Microsoft Teams. The meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube. I'm Councillor Chris Bowring. I'm the chairman of the meeting. The Planning Committee, most of whom are in the chamber, consists of 11 elected borough councillors who are supported by a variety of officers. There are representatives on the committee from all 4 political groups on the council. Those officers physically present tonight are, with me in the chamber, Carla, who is Democratic and Electoral Services Specialist and clerk to the committee, and Madeleine Shopland, who is also Democratic and Electoral Services Specialist. Other officers who will appear remotely are Justin Turvey, who is the Operational Manager for Development Management. Connor Corrigan is a Service Manager for Planning and Delivery. Judy Kelly, Highway Development Manager. And Mary Severin, who is the Borough Solicitor, who will help us on legal matters, should we require her to do so. And of course, the case officers who are remote, as Chris Howard, Nick Chancellor and Simon Taylor. This is a quasi-judicial meeting with formal procedures which must be adhered to. For each application, firstly, the planning officer will present the application. Then only those speakers who have pre-registered to speak will be called to address the committee. No one else, including borough councillors, town and parish councillors, agents, applicants, objectors, supporters, are permitted to address the committee, ask questions, interrupt or disrupt the meeting. But everyone has had a chance to comment on the applications through the normal consultation process. Please note that there is a strict time limit for speakers, excuse me, of 3 minutes for each of the 4 categories: town and parish councils, objectors, supporters, and borough members affected by the application. Members of the committee are more impressed by the quality of what you say rather than how long you speak for. But above all, please stay within your time limit. Following the registered speakers, members of the committee will discuss and debate the application and seek clarification from the council's professional planning officers in order to try to reach a decision. The decision reached by the committee may or may not agree with that recommended by the presenting case officer. Finally, it is the committee's responsibility to determine any valid planning application placed before it using current national and local planning policies and relevant decisions of the Independent Planning Inspectorate. So move on to the agenda, and we begin with apologies for absence. Please, Callum.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Calderon, and Gary Cowan is with us virtually this evening.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Members, are there any points to raise on the minutes? If not, I will sign them as a true record. Members, are there any declarations of interest? No. Are there any applications to be deferred or withdrawn? I'm going to blame. No, you don't.
None, Chairman.
Thank you. So we move on to the meat of the evening. 5 planning applications to consider, and we begin with an application which, although it says in the agenda refers to Cutbush Lane, it's actually Thames Valley Science Park. That's on page 17 of the agenda. So I'll hand over to Chris Howard to give us his presentation. Chris, over to you.
Presentation up, you just bear with me for 2 seconds. Is that coming through in the chamber for you?
Yep, thank you, Chris.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. The application is for a TV studios on land to the south, on the Science Park to east of Eastern Relief Road. The studio would be used for filming of television programmes and has been designed to have a live audience. It should, however, be noted that not all productions will include a live audience. In terms of the location of site, this is shown outlined in red of the existing Science Park campus. The relationship of it to the existing Gateway building and the Rutherford Centre is also shown on the slide. The Science Park has an existing planning permission for around 55,000 square metres of floor space, and the studio building itself would be about 4,500 square metres in floor area. The Science Park was originally envisaged for research and development together with innovative industries, and the studio use does not accord with the Science Park policy strictly, but for the reasons set out in the report, it is considered acceptable. The studio building secures significant employment with 95 direct jobs created and a further 55 indirect positions. In addition, the building of the facility itself would deliver temporary construction jobs. For access, the access would be along the Eastern Relief Road and through South Avenue as shown here, both of which have been delivered in full. This is the aerial photograph of the Science Park, and as you can see, the Gateway building, the Rutherford Centre, is located in the background. It should be noted that the image was captured some time ago, as the Littlebrook estate in the foreground has since been completed. The TV studio would link in to the existing Gateway building. In terms of site photos, the next few slides will show the relationship of the proposed TV studio with the surrounding area. The images are taken from key viewpoints from around the site. The first image is taken from the Eastern Relief Road and Science Park roundabout. This shows the existing Gateway building and the rough position of a TV studio as highlighted. This is the this slide shows the relationship of the building to the Littlebrook estate. There is over 90 metres separation between the studio building and Littlebrook estate, and it will be located on the other side of the Eastern Relief Road. The level of separation to this estate and other surrounding dwellings is sufficient to overcome any significant amenity issues. Planning permission for phase 1 of the Science Park was also granted in 2010, so a form of employment space in this location has been established for over a decade. This is images taken further south on Eastern Relief Road and shows the context of the site with the Littlebrook estate. The building would have a prominent position within the locality given its location on the Science Park campus and relationship to Eastern Relief Road. This image is taken from the Eastern Relief Road from the north, and it shows an existing bund which will help to partially screen the studio building. Additional planting has also been secured on the bund which will further soften the building. The relationship of the Science Park buildings is shown on this slide, which is taken from the roundabout within the Science Park campus. The choice of materials will complement the design of the existing Gateway building. Turning now to the detailed design of the building and on-site relationships, this slide shows the footprint of the TV studios, which is outlined in red. As advised, the building would link onto the existing Gateway building, allowing for some of the facilities to be shared. Parking would be located to the rear of the site as on the previously approved Phase 1 Science Park car park, and delivery of this would be secured by a condition. Public access would be from the existing Science Park Square, which has been delivered in association with the Gateway building. This slide shows the internal uses of the ground floor of the building, and the building would be effectively zoned into 3 areas. These comprise of a stage area and a space to accommodate filming, a workshop to support the production of the stage area, and also an accommodation block which will provide welfare facilities, dressing rooms, and public access. The accommodation extends over a further 3 floors. A service area would also be located to the rear of the building. Moving on to elevations, this slide shows the northeast and northwest facing elevation. The northeast elevation would front onto the existing square. This slide shows the southwest and southeast facing elevations. The southwest elevation would face towards the Eastern Relief Road. In regards to height, the building would be around 19.6 metres in height, and the height is governed by its intended use for filming and space requirements for lighting and filming rigs. The final few slides show some perspective shots of the studio building and give a good indication of a detailed design. This slide shows the building from within the existing Science Park campus. Public access would be from a square, and the use of glazing for this element provides a sense of arrival. The applicant has worked with the council and parish council through a design review process panel on elements such as landscaping and the materials. This has resulted in revised plans in regards to these matters, which has strengthened the design approach. This slide shows a more overarching perspective shot and the relationship of existing built form of the Science Park campus. As shown, the studio building would complement the existing buildings. The materials for the main building are aluminium panels, which have been broken up horizontally to break up the massing. The workshops are also clad in dark panels to the rear of the building. Moving on to a couple of perspective shots taken outside the site. This was taken from the north and eastern relief road. The existing bund, as highlighted before, provides a degree of screening for the building. This will be enhanced by further tree planting, which will be secured through the design review process. Again, cladding helps minimise the impact on the building and the character area, and the landscape officer raises no objections in terms of the form of the building and the wider impacts. The final shot is taken from within the Little Brick estate. This again provides a good indication of how the building would link into the existing gateway building, and also gives a sense of separation to existing residential development. Finishing up with the recommendation is three-tiered as set out within the report. It's to approve subject to Section 106 agreement, and the conditions as set out in the report and amended in the members' update. Should the Section 106 agreement not be completed by, sorry, the slide, I think it's set as 6 months within the report of the committee resolution, it's requested that the committee resolve to delegate to the head of development management to refuse the application. Just to finish up, in terms of the members' update, on page 17, there's a correction to the site address. It's land at Thames Science Park, as the chairman outlined. On page 30, add CP16 to the list of policies. On page 31, paragraph 2, clarification in terms of policy TB13. This seeks to maintain settlement separation between Shinfield and Lower Early. As the building is on an allocated site of extent planning permission for a similar, slightly smaller building, the relationship is considered acceptable. On page 19, insert the plans as set out. And just a couple of tweaks in terms of the conditions. On page 19, condition 5, just update the parking spaces, which should be 175, which will serve the needs of the user. And the conditions set out there. On page 22, update the wording to amend this to allow for recording on bank holidays, because quite a lot of the shows that they are intended to use by the end user will be filmed on bank holidays potentially. So that's been amended, and just some additional text inserted there. And condition 17, just an extension to the delivery hours. The rationale behind this is because they tend to change the studios overnight for filming in the next day, and there's a bit more text below that just to amplify that. And then just a couple of other clarifications in terms of the parking spaces on page 28 and page 42. And that's all for me. I'll hand back to the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We have 3 speakers in favour of the application: Mark Owen, Peter Jones, Jason Lebidineurs. Gentlemen, I'm not sure whether it says here you're here to answer any technical questions. I don't know whether you wish to speak at this point. If you do, you have 3 minutes between you. Would you like to go ahead if you do wish to speak, please, one of you?
Yes, I'll be speaking. Yes. Good evening. My name is Mark Owen. I'm the planning consultant acting on behalf of the University of Reading for the proposals for a TV studio building at the Thames Valley Science Park. The global market for film and TV production has boomed, and investment in the UK industry has reached the highest figures on record. This is due to a number of factors, including the rise of new digital streaming services and the continued attraction of the UK and its skill base as a location for filming and post-production work. Yet, as this demand for studio space is increasing, the regulatory and political pressure to move productions outside the M25 is also mounting. It is a key reason why a TV studio building at the Science Park will also be so well placed to meet the growing demand from this sector. The development of the Science Park is a key driver in improving skills, productivity, and competition in a rapidly changing global economy. The proposal will not only be situated at the Science Park within the boundaries of the local plan employment allocation, but will form part of the university's future concept for the Science Park in creating innovation valleys, to which the proposal will form part of the Cine Valley, focused on film, TV and media. The proposed development is expected to create employment opportunities, including 95 direct full-time employees, The university is dedicated to ensuring that the occupier will make student engagement a priority by working closely with the University of Reading School of Film, Theatre and Television, with the opportunity for work placements, specialist training and mentoring schemes. It should also be emphasised that local residents will have the opportunity to view shows produced at the studios through ticketed events. The design of the building has been determined by the functions of TV production activities, in particular its height. However, in order to minimise the visual impact of the building, the use of dark metal cladding is proposed. Furthermore, the existing earth bund to the south of the proposed development will assist in reducing the visual impact of the building as viewed from the residential dwellings to the south of the Eastern Relief Road, with additional planting on the bund as secured by planning condition to further screen the facility. The development will also be physically connected to the Gateway building to assist its relationship with the existing Science Park buildings. The Science Park enjoys a high level of pedestrian cycle connectivity. There's also an established and frequent bus service, which allows access to key destinations, including the university's White Knights campus. The proposed parking arrangements would see the existing Science Park car park utilised, in addition to the already consented adjacent car park extension area. The use of PV and air source heat pumps will ensure the reduction of the building's carbon emissions by 14%, which exceeds local plan requirements. An area of wildflower grassland will be created within the wider Science Park site, which would create a biodiversity net gain of 12%. We therefore hope that the committee can support the officer's recommendation for this application, which will provide much needed TV studio space and support the university's vision for the growth of the Thames Valley Science Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Well timed, just 3 minutes. Members, then over to you. Anyone wishing to speak? Rochelle? Rochelle and then Andrew, Stephen.
Well, between a film studio and a telly studio, I think we should be calling this a media center rather than the science center. But and Wokingham becoming the Hollywood of the UK. Will there be apprenticeships available for young people in the Wokingham area, not just students, but local young people who are NEETs or in places where they could actually use this?
Chris, can you answer that?
Yes, they are contributing to our borough's our employment skills plan within the borough, and we will also be seeking on a wider application to drill down into some more work in terms of a more bespoke programme for the wider application when it comes forward.
And are we going to become the Hollywood of the UK also?
Potentially, there's quite a large studio space.
Okay. Rochelle, Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I note that this is a site identified for employment use, that the specific types of employment created directly and indirectly are likely to bring benefits to the local area, and that Shinfield Parish Council supports the application. I also appreciate that on page 18, it's stated that the applicant has made considerable efforts to minimise the visual impact on the surrounding area, and that the height of the building, which is greater than that in the parameter plans, is dictated by its end use. Notwithstanding, I do have 3 questions. The first relates to the landscaped bund. I note the landscape officer has raised no objection. However, can officers confirm how far the bund will extend in a southeasterly direction? Specifically, whether it stops well short of the eastern end of the proposed studios as shown on page 37, or whether it will extend beyond this and provide additional screening, as seems to be suggested in one of the drawings on the planning portal, that's revision A on bund planting. If so, this could be particularly important to residents of Whitethorn. My remaining 2 questions both relate to car parking. There's a reference on page 18 to securing biodiversity enhancements, but then on page 19 to securing a contingency sum for off-site planting. Will there be any other new planting on site apart from on the bund? I note particularly the very large area of additional car parking that does not appear to have a soft landscaping plan attached. Since the additional car park spaces are linked to this new building, I would have hoped that they would be included in the application, along with a car park landscape with car park landscaping plans. And that leads me to my second parking or car park related question from the supplementary agenda. On page 19, condition 5 is asking us to consider reducing the number of car park spaces from 175 to the 267 that was identified in the documents pack. Now, I appreciate that in the supplementary agenda, again, it says, okay, that additional spaces will be delivered for any future development on the plot. But my question to officers is, given that there will be public audiences at some of these productions, for some of these productions, can we be absolutely certain that the revised 175 car parking spaces is going to be sufficient, not only for the audiences, but all the ancillary staff and so forth, so that we don't get car parking spilling out, into the nearby estates?
Okay, Andrew, Chris.
As of a landscape fund is already in situ on site, that does extend across the Eastern Relief Road on that boundary all the way along down towards the roundabout, the Science Park roundabout, Eastern Relief Road Science Park roundabout, if that makes sense. So that is already in place. We have looked at that and considered the impact on the estate as well, and we're also will be seeking for a contingency sum because there is quite a lot of landscaping around the Hawthorne estate, and we've secured, or we're looking to secure a contingency sum in the Section 106 agreement to strengthen landscaping on the Hawthorne site should we need to. But at the moment, as it stands, we consider that the proposed landscaping is sufficient to screen the building. And as I said in the presentation, a formal development is always expected there. With the levels of separation, we're not considering the building to be overbearing with or without the landscaping in place. But appreciate that that is basically will help to soften the impact of the development for those residents. In terms of the car parking is subject to a separate reserve matters consent, which has already been approved. This did include landscaping within it, so basically the condition has been applied to ensure that they lay out the spaces as approved on a reserve matters consent. I think was approved back in 2016 off the top of my head. So there are landscaping plans for that area, but that's a valid point. And in terms of the spaces, the highways officer has assessed the application and is satisfied with the 175 spaces there. I don't really think that it may be something that Judy can pick up on, but I don't think the end user or the university would want people parking ad hocly around the site in any event. So there is the potential for them to extend that car park if they need to. But at this point in time, we're satisfied that those spaces are sufficient.
I'm slightly confused. I thought it was 175 was the increase of 267. So there's 432.
The 175. Is the need generated by the studio, sorry, Chairman. And the 175 is the need generated by the studio itself. So we're basically covering that within the condition. And then the surplus, the 175 is take away 263, which I can't do off the top of my head, but that will be brought forward if building 4 on the Science Park campus is delivered.
Okay, do you want to come back, Andrew? Okay, thank you. Stephen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm well disposed to this application. It's obviously not quite policy compliant, but we need to set against that the employment benefits and the fact that there are no objections from parish council, board members or the public. But I do have a couple of queries, if I may. First one really picks up on Andrew's point, and I just forgive me if I've missed something in the report, Chris, but what I was trying to get was a sense of what we anticipated the size of audiences could be. What would be the capacity of the studios in terms of the number of people, members of the public coming to watch some of these productions might be. Obviously, there is a figure that's in the minds of the highways officers because that's generated the 175 car parking spaces. But is it possible just to know what that figure is, what we anticipate the maximum audience studios might be? That's my first question. Do you want me to ask my second at the same time, for instance?
Yes, go.
My second is an entirely technical point, which I'm sure will not interest anyone who might happen to be listening. But and I'm sure this has been explained to me before, but I must confess I've forgotten. I'm slightly puzzled still about the alternative recommendation. I still can't quite see a difference between them, because if the legal agreement isn't completed within 6 months, it will be the grant of planning permission won't happen anyway, because it's subject to that. And yet on page 25, you're suggesting an alternative that if they don't come up with it in 6 months, we refuse. Aren't they the same thing? Maybe I'm just being very dense here and missing it.
No, we have been here before. I remember that.
I think we have
what
been.
the answer was though.
No, nor can I.
I'll hand over to Chris. Perhaps you can sort it out.
Sorry, excuse me. In terms of the audience numbers, there would be between 350 and 550 audience members. The sort of car parking space generated from that is on assumptions, based on assumptions that there'll be 3 people per car. In terms of the alternative recommendation, this is done to in sort of not in some circumstances where the developers have been a bit reluctant to enter into the Section 106 agreement, it sort of forces their hand to complete that agreement within a timescale, because there is always a threat of us to refuse their application on that basis. So it's kind of a safety net, if you like, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It's a bit belt and braces, but it makes good sense. Connor's going to come in, I think.
No, I was just going to say it also means we don't have to take things back to planning committee, so it gives us the authorization to do that.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. Can I just I don't want to prolong this, but the estimate that you're going to get an average of 3 persons per car, and that generates the 175 spaces, seems, dare I say, somewhat optimistic. Is there any evidence that audiences are likely to arrive in groups of 3? It's quite possible there'll be 2 would be the average, and then that completely alters the situation. However, I suspect there's very little point in pursuing this, because if I remember correctly, you've said this has already been determined at reserved matters stage. So there's probably not much we can do about incapacity, is there?
Maybe if I just jump in here. So I think we've worked off some broad averages. Obviously, I mean, it's going to depend on the nature of the TV studio and so on. Which particular program is being filmed, but we do need to bear in mind as well that there's other options for people to get to the site. There's a half-an-hour bus service. There's also condition 12 requires an event and travel management plan. So if there are going to be any extreme events where there's any particular concerns, we would need contingency arrangements to be set out within that. As Chris mentioned earlier, the previous reserve matters application in 2016 has approved quite a large car parking area at this site, which hasn't been fully built out yet, but we would expect that the sort of the hours of the sort of office use and studio use might necessarily coincide. So there should be ample capacity on site, and with the condition 12 and also condition 7, the parking management strategy condition, to take care of any sort of unforeseen events.
Thank you, Judy. Just a very quick comment, which is that I do hope you're right that people might use the bus, but as performances are likely to finish at 11, I can't imagine on a wet November evening people will be very enthusiastic about using a bus.
Yeah, I mean, it is only just 200 meters walk away. So, you know, it could be actually faster getting out of the site. You never know, than going back to your car.
But in
A
the
good
evening,
po- a good point.
in the evening, there'll be the other car parking will be freed up because the office is not being worked. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
When the bus might not be available, so it's compensation. Okay, Stephen. Oh, great, thank you. Pauline.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to ask the same question Stephen did, so thank you for the answer. I agree with you. I think an assumption of 3 spaces per, or 3 people per car is pretty unlikely. And I would worry about the timing of the bus service and whether it's actually going to be running at the time people would want to get the bus to go to wherever the bus goes to. So I don't know if there's any detail in here about what the bus service is going to be and what it's going to run on. And maybe Judy could explain if that isn't. I don't remember seeing it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, sorry. Go on. Oh, yeah, I was just going to answer that one point, which was, you know, the events management plan. They would need to provide, I mean, for example, they might be running shuttle services from the station or something like that, you know, as part of their measures. So that would be the sort of thing that would be looked at through condition 12.
So how much control have we got on that, Judy? Because I remember school management plans for school parents dropping off kids, which do not work. Have we got any more control in this case?
Yeah, I mean, they need to submit the details to us for full review and consideration, and we need to, you know, we will robustly look at that in terms of, you know, evidence of other, you know, studio sites, travel patterns, you know, hours of use and so on, what measures have worked elsewhere. So we'll have full control over the discharge of that condition, and it's a prior to occupation condition. So before they start using the site, we need to be happy with the arrangements that they've put in place.
And if we find out that in retrospect they don't work, like the school travel plans don't seem to, can we revisit it? Is there an option to have a?
Yeah, I would say so, because I mean a school travel plan, for example, is a living document, so it's not something that gets written once, put on a shelf, and if it doesn't work, you know, it's too bad. It's the sort of thing that has to be reviewed 6 monthly or annually. So and the site does have an overarching travel plan as well to look at to look at matters. So in a way, I think we've got quite a lot of monitoring methods.
And the other question was quite a minor one, and I think it's probably just the use of words. When it says accommodation block, I presume that's not for overnight accommodation.
Where is that, Pauline?
It's on the first page, I think. Let me see if I can find it again. It's page 17. It says 771 square meters and an accommodation block in para 2. Now, looking at the plans, it looks like they're not overnight accommodation. It's something else, and it's just a word that they're using. But I just wanted to be sure that it wasn't going to be overnight accommodation, bearing in mind the hours of the thing being open, finish at 11 o'clock at night. I presume it's just a film word for something else, but.
It's it's probably there's probably a better way of phrasing it, but it's basically that area is used for the sort of dressing rooms, some of the sort of behind the scenes sort of green rooms as they call them, and also sort of some of the public admission as well. So there's no overnight accommodation. The long and short of it is basically.
Thank you.
Angus, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Totally support this application in general. There's one comment and one question. The comment is I was surprised that we've taken up so much land for car parking rather than a 2-story one, but that's already been agreed, so there's nothing we can do about it for this application. The question really relates to the amended condition 14, where it says that no recording or filming should take place between 2300 hours and 7 o'clock Monday to Sunday unless prior notification has been issued to the local planning authority. That doesn't give us any powers at all were this to become, I mean, they've given reasons why they've asked for it, but just looking at all the possibilities, I'm surprised it doesn't say unless agreement has been issued by the local planning authority. Could you comment on that?
Judy, is that legally enforceable? Or Chris?
We could amend that wording to as Angus said out, Councillor Ross said out, to say unless otherwise agreed in writing, that probably give us more, what's the word, influence in terms of extended hours.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angus. Yeah, can I, Angus, I'm very happy to second that change of wording. Did we actually get the exact wording, I wonder? Perhaps I can I leave it to the case officer to deal with that to make it more secure so that we have the powers that we're seeking?
Yes, that's no problems at all. I think it'll just be changing the bold words and to unless otherwise agreed in writing by the local planning authority. I think. We'll do that for you.
I think formally I need a second. Well, I'll second it. Can I see those in favour of that minor amendment, please, to that condition? Okay, thank you. That's carried. Now the next speaker is Sam, please.
Hello. My question was in relation to the car parking, but it's also related to the staffing levels. Great to hear that there's 95 proposed full-time employees. I think that's really good news. Great to hear that. Really pleased. It'd be great to see a forecast, a level of just a rough, included in this, what would be the, rough sort of number of freelancers, contractors that they'd be looking to use, because if for example, that number was doubled, you could easily be, the car parking could become insufficient. And we all know that in the media and creative space, freelancers, contractors are often quite a big part of the workforce. And the other question was in relation to the car parking. Have the developers thought about the use of electric car charging points to encourage those traveling regularly to this site to be able to encourage them to have electric vehicles?
Chris, just come in. There's a question.
Yeah, in terms of the configuration of the staff, so to say, we don't have any control over that, unfortunately. And I'm just double checking the conditions. I think there's a degree of electric parking included, but again, the car park was approved back in 2016, so we can't revisit this that at this stage, unfortunately.
Come back, Sam.
Okay, I just wanted to see, I guess, regarding the, obviously can't have an influence on the staffing levels, but it would have been great to have had this included to somewhere, just as an aside.
Okay, thank you. Gary from the Great Beyond.
Thank you. Sam and Pauline picked up on my two points. I mean, the council has got a climate emergency programme, sort of provision of electric charging points, or even the provision of facility to enable them to be put in at a later date should the use of electric cars expand, which is what everybody hopes for. And Pauline's point, which the officer replied to, it might be they might be running buses from the station. It's not really a particularly good planning thinking, really. It's a bit finger in the air. But I think we're probably stuck with these things. But I would like to see at least us requesting that the developer provide as many electric car parking charging points, or the facility to enable them to be expanded as the car park uses increases. I'm fully supportive of the planning application, but there are just two little tidying up points I would have liked to have seen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Nobody else, I think. Anybody else want to come back?
Sorry, could I just add some? My connection just kicked me out, so I had to log back in again. Electric vehicle charging points, there are some already provided in the Northern Car Park, and the travel plan for the site includes a commitment to provide further electric vehicle charging points as demand arises. So that's something that's regularly sort of monitored, just to give some assurance there.
Yeah, just on that, and I welcome that. But in a climate emergency, what we should be doing is every time we have a planning application here, we should be putting in as many car parking electric car charge points as we wish, not leaving it to other documents that don't relate specifically to that planning application. But as I said, I'm still quite supportive of the application.
Thank you, Gary. I think we can go to the vote now. No one appears to wish to propose anything else. Rochelle, sorry.
Will the infrastructure be put in advance for the car charging points that will be needed in the future? So it'll be more or less plug and play when we need to put them in, rather than having to dig up the whole car park to put them in later.
I think that's really a policy matter, isn't it? But,
it's a question, since they're designing it now and they're putting in the car charging points, and they said they're going to be putting them in for the future. I said, will you put the infrastructure in first, so you have all the cables underneath all the road and things like this, and so all you have to do is plug and play and put them in when you need them.
Yeah, so
planning for the future.
Rochelle, just to clarify, so some of that car park's already in existence, but they will be extending it. So when they extend the car park, they'll have the ability to put in the cabling, because the car park was built some time ago when electric vehicles didn't really exist. So we can't put it all in advance, but it will come as the next bit of the car park goes in.
Okay. Right, the recommendation is on page 19. There are 3 amendments in the supplementary planning agenda, and condition 14 has been amended by Angus's proposal. Can I see those in favour of approving this application, please? Are there any against? That's unanimous. That application is approved. Next application is Hogwart Farm, and the case officer is Nick Chancellor. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone see the screen that I'm sharing?
Yep.
Brilliant.
Well, the blue rectangle.
Okay, I'll begin. So the application pertains to an 11.64 hectare parcel of land shown here at the former Hogwart Farm. That's east of Shirlands Road and south of Byway 18. The application seeks reserve matters approval pursuant to the outline planning permission, which was granted a number of years ago now. Members of the planning committee will already be familiar with the Arborfield SDL. Both halves of the development, that's Arborfield Garrison to the north and Hogwart Farm to the south, benefit from outline planning permissions totaling 3,500 dwellings, which establish the principle of development across the entire site. Construction within the northern half, the Arborfield Garrison site, is now well underway. Phase 1 of the Hogwart Farm component in the southern half of the SDL, that's shown here in yellow, gained reserve matters approval in 2018 and is now nearing completion. The location of the current reserve matters site is shown here edged red within the wider outline planning permission, edged blue. In accordance with the outline planning permission for Hogwart Farm, 2 existing dwellings and a number of light industrial units and agricultural buildings will be demolished in order to facilitate the development within the red line boundary here. The site is otherwise mostly agricultural fields and hedgerow with some wooded areas too. The current application comprises details of a further 235 dwellings across parcels P2, P3 and P7. Access is via phase 1 of the development and a proposed bus loop, which comes off the 9 Mile Ride extension, which is currently being constructed. Also included is 4 hectares of public open space to the east, which will form a green spine as envisaged within the outline planning permission, together with a series of landscaped amenity and play areas. There are a mixture of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom homes, as well as 1 and 2 bedroom apartments across the development. 35% of the dwellings, that's 82 units, will be affordable, with all of the developers' affordable housing obligations being met on site in this case. The site is broken down into 3 character areas where subtle variations in style and built form allow for transition from relative informality, where the development borders the surrounding countryside, to a greater formality in more prominent parts of the development. The layout has been designed to fit appropriately within the existing field patterns and landscape setting. And I'll just show a series of street scene elevations which demonstrate the different character areas. The building heights have been carefully considered. The majority of the site is two-storey, with some three-storey units along the bus loop road and at key focal points, as well as a few 2.5-storey units in areas where they front onto amenity space. The layout complies with the council standards in respect to separation distances and internal living space. 2 areas of amenity and play space have been integrated within the residential parcels, one to the north of P7 and another to the southwest of P3. All but 13 of the homes meet the minimum 11-metre threshold for garden length. And in the case of these 13, they're generally mitigated through wider than average plot sizes, a need to provide a rear access, or else the garden is 10.5 metres, so nearly 11 metres. The development is well separated from existing development and will not have a negative impact on residential amenity. The built form, in conjunction with the landscape scheme, which I'll come on to in further detail a bit later on, is an appropriate response to the existing context. In terms of the highways layout, the street hierarchy will provide a series of connected and legible streets and anticipates connections to future development phases. A safe and accessible route is provided towards the future primary school site and neighbourhood centre to the immediate east of the Reserve Matters site. Access to Bowhunt School to the north will be via phase 1 of the development, which is currently nearing completion. A shared footway cycleway provides onward connections northwards to the rest of the SDL, with eastward pedestrian routes towards Finchampstead also accessible via Byway 18. An existing pedestrian access to the Sang, due south of the site, will be maintained throughout the build process. And details of bus stop locations have been provided within the site layout and will ensure that all dwellings are located within 400 to 500 metres of bus services upon completion of the 9-mile ride extension, which is currently under construction and due for completion spring/summer next year. A bus gate will provide a single-lane bus access across the green spine area. The route will otherwise be closed to vehicular traffic so as to mitigate the ecological and arboricultural impact on this area of the site. In terms of parking provision, the layout provides 420 allocated driveway spaces in addition to 75 garages, 6 carport spaces, 47 visitor and 38 unallocated. The provision is well distributed throughout the development, corresponding to 2.33 spaces per dwelling on average, and therefore meets the council's requirements. Cycle parking and storage is also provided in accordance with the council standards. To the east of the site, and I mentioned this earlier in my presentation, is a large area of public open space, and that corresponds to parcel PG1 in the outline planning permission. PG1 will be a primary feature within the site-wide green infrastructure network, providing a bridleway link between Park Lane at Shearlands Copse and Barkham Byway 18, further north at its intersection with the 9-mile ride extension. The route will be suitable for pedestrians, horse riders and cyclists, forming a landscape green spine and an attractive setting for the residential development and the future primary school to the east. The layout also provides recreational opportunities in the form of trim trails, outdoor exercise equipment, community orchard tree planting, a neighbourhood equipped area of play and a local area of play. It will also provide an alternative pedestrian route to the future primary school and neighbourhood centre for the development parcels to the northwest of the site. So in conclusion, the development complies with the council's policies and standards and is considered to be high quality design. It's therefore recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thank you, Nick. We have one speaker, Laura Powell, who is the applicant. Good evening. Good evening, Laura.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. My name is Laura Powell and I am the Senior Planning Manager for Carla Home Thames, who are the applicant for this planning application. Members will be aware that to date, the site has been delivered under the Legal and General Homes brand. We, Carla Homes, are owned by Legal and General, and whilst the brand remains, Carla will be responsible for the future delivery of this site, taking forward the principles of design quality and placemaking established by our colleagues. Many of you will be familiar with the Hogwart Farm site to which this application relates. As you know, it was granted outline planning permission in 2017 for a mixed-use development, including 1,500 new homes, and forms part of the wider Arborfield Garrison SDL. To date, members have positively determined applications for the first phase of residential development in 2018, which included 120 new homes, of which approximately 90 are now occupied. In addition, in early 2020, the southern section of the 9-mile ride extension was also approved. This strategic piece of highways infrastructure is anticipated to be completed in spring next year and is already under construction via the council's contract with Belfast Beatty. The planning application before you this evening relates to the next residential phase of development and comprises 3 development parcels, which lie immediately to the south of phase 1. In addition, as part of this application, Carla have also included PG1, which is a substantial area of open space. The inclusion of this land is part of Carla's commitment to ensure infrastructure is delivered at the site as early as possible. The open space will provide a green connection through the development to the Sang at the south of the site. It will incorporate a section of the wider brideway network, as well as children's play areas and a trim trail exercise area. The application will deliver 235 high-quality new homes, ranging in size and type from 1-bedroom apartments to 4-bedroom houses. Proposals will also include 82 affordable homes to deliver a policy-compliant 35% provision. We have worked hard with officers to ensure that the scheme before you is compliant with policy and respects the character of the surrounding area. The development incorporates a variety of house types, materials and architectural details. We've also ensured that the application provides parking in line with your parking standards. Furthermore, the proposals include the planting of a substantial number of new trees across the residential area, as well as the proposed open space. Additionally, the development also incorporates a number of ecological enhancements, including a new bat house, hedgehog-friendly fencing, bat and bird boxes, all of which are distributed throughout the development. To achieve our 10% reduction in carbon emissions, PV panels and fabric first will be utilised on and within the new homes. Following detailed consultation with officers and stakeholders, we are delighted that the application has received no public objections and officers have recommended the application for approval. We hope members will support the application and we look forward to building upon the success of phase 1 and supporting the council in delivering important, high quality new homes within the borough. Many thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Members, over to you. Who would like to speak? No. In a different order, Angus, please.
Oh, right. Watching to the end. It's only a very small point. I noticed on page 99, we've covered about the SANGs and the strategic asset management and monitoring, the SAM. What I don't see in the actual conditions is tying down the payment of the SAM. Is that necessary to be clear, please, to ensure that it is payable, or was it done through the outline?
So that matter of the SANG was all dealt with as part of the outline application. The SANG is now open and it's all under control.
So they will be bound to pay the SAM once?
Yes.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Obviously, this is a reserved matters application. The principle of developments established through the core strategy and the outline planning consent, which I think 2014. So we haven't got an awful lot to discuss, and clearly there were no comments from the parish council, local members or the public. I do feel obliged in Carl's absence to say that it is a very welcome sign that all of the affordable housing, and it is at 35%, is actually going to be provided on site, which is a matter not only that Carl, but I think the rest of us have all been concerned about in other applications in the borough. So it's extremely good news to see that this is all going to be provided on site.
Thank you. Don't think there was a question there. So, Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have three questions and I'd like to ask them in two batches, if I may. The first question is regards to parking. On page 87, it's stated that of the 586 proposed parking spaces, 6 will be carport and 75 garage. It's stated on page 80 that the parking spaces shall be permanently maintained and remain available for parking of vehicles at all times. I'm assuming that that includes the 75 garages and the carports, but residents rarely seem to use their garages in our borough for parking cars. If the garages were not included in the calculation, would the proposed development still meet the borough parking standards, and if so, by how much? And given the statement on page 80, i.e. that they shall be permanently maintained and remain available for parking at all times, does this mean that applications for garage and carport conversions and the loss of those car parking spaces would never be approved? I'll ask my other two questions after.
Judy again.
Sorry. So Nick, were you going to jump in? No, that's fine.
No, that's all right. I'll let you take that one, Judy.
Yeah. So basically, the restrictive condition, yeah, I agree, and our parking standards does say that approximately half of garages are actually used for parking, but the benefit of that condition is that they cannot convert those garages to other uses without first having to put in a planning application to do so. So there is some restriction there. If we disregarded the garages we only count as half a space, so that 2.33 figure per house in terms of parking spaces available only accounts for half of the garages anyway. If we didn't include any of the garages, that would come down a bit, but we would still be looking at over 2 spaces per dwelling across the whole development, including obviously the 1 beds, the 3 beds, and so on.
Thank you for that answer. I hadn't realised that the garages only count as half a space in the calculation, so I suppose that's a little bit reassuring. But I am concerned that there's still the possibility, of applications coming forward at some point in the future, to seek for garages to be converted to habitable rooms. My other two questions, the first is very short. It's on page 96. Could we please just have a little bit more information about the number of homes that will have PV panels installed? And then a much more substantive question on page 99. It's stated that Thames Water confirm that that upgrade works are required to serve the wider development. My understanding is that there may be significant ongoing issues with water and sewage in some parts of neighbouring Shinfield. Would it be possible to apply a condition that the necessary upgrades are fully functional before first occupancy of the proposed homes? And the reason for this, of course, is because we all want all of our residents, including those in new developments like this being proposed here, to have a pleasant lifestyle and not to have to deal with problems such as water and sewage infrastructure.
Thank you. On the question of photovoltaic panels, the developer has submitted a strategy to achieve a 10% reduction in CO2 consumption across the site. I must say I don't actually have the precise figure to hand for how many panels that will include. It may well be included within the strategy, but they are required to achieve that 10% reduction, and that will there'll be a calculation which scales up and requires a certain number of the units to have PV panels in order to achieve that reduction. So that complies with the condition we applied at outline stage, and I'm satisfied that the developer is able to fulfil its obligations in that respect. To your question about upgrading of the sewer works, there was a condition again on the outline planning permission which required the works to be in place by 200 occupations across the entire outline site. The first phase of the development was slightly under 200, but it will be the case that not many occupations at all could take place within this phase. I think it's only about 20 or 30 before the upgrade works would need to be in place. Thames Water have been kept informed throughout this process and are working with the developer, I know, actively to ensure that the time frame is met such that there wouldn't be any issues with sewer capacity. So all the parties are fully aware and are working towards a solution. But in any case, that condition only allows for 200 occupations across the entire outline site before such works are in place.
Okay, Andrew. I wonder whether it might be useful to print some or all of the outline conditions for reserved matters applications. Might be helpful. Perhaps that could be considered. Rochelle.
Okay, several questions. We're going back over parking again. You're saying it's 2.33 per dwelling. The average in Wokingham is 2.53 cars per dwelling. And the number of cars per garages, you're claiming that half the garages are used for parking. I would say more like 5% are. I'm judging by the amount of garages and amount of houses that I've seen canvassing recently, that 5% is a much more realistic number, not 50%. I'd also like to ask where the 47 visitor spaces are they going to be spread around? It doesn't sound like that's very much for 235 dwellings. That means that only a certain amount of people can actually have anything. If we have one person, if two people have a party, there's going to be no visitor spaces whatsoever. And if you want to know exactly how bad that is, go to any of the new estates in any part of Wokingham, and you'll see all these cars parked all over the place where they shouldn't be parked. And you'll get a better idea. We need to have adequate parking. Lastly, on 47, you're talking about the electric charging points. Again, will the infrastructure be actually put in before the houses are actually occupied, so we can actually put in electric charging points in the future without having to dig up the road, which is going to not be very good for the residents. Lastly, will heat pumps be installed and no gas appliances? In meeting our climate change emergency declaration, we shouldn't be having just a 10% reduction. We should be having closer to 50% reduction and not having any gas appliances whatsoever, I thought. But apparently that's not necessarily the case. So I guess we're not really having an emergency. It's only a sort of a climate change annoyance. So I'd like answers to all of those questions, please. Some of them are going to Judy.
I think, sorry, I'll just answer the last one first, I think. Well, firstly, I think climate agenda, we should be seeking less parking, in my opinion. But anyway, Judy will answer that the parking issue. But in terms of the gas boilers and the other elements, we obviously have to work within the policy that's adopted. And until the policies are amended, we can't do anything different than ask for policy compliancy, which they're doing. Building regs will change, and that will cover things like gas boilers and other elements, but that sits outside planning. So that's why we have the requirement we have for sustainable measures at the moment. I'll let Judy answer the parking.
Thanks, Connor. Yeah, so the occupancy of garage, the 50% comes from our parking standard study in our adopted policy. So there was research carried out into the occupancy and the use of garages. It does vary up and down the country, obviously, and even probably from different places in the borough to the next. But 50% is what we say in our standards we'll treat garages as. until that's changed, that's kind of our position. 47 visitor spaces. There's also 38 unallocated spaces. So there's a total of 85 sort of up for grabs spaces, which we've made sure are well distributed around the site. They're not just on the edges. They're sort of, there's availability, in all of the streets. And the question on electric vehicle strategy. So yeah, we need the details of the electric vehicle strategy early doors, really, to make sure that we can plan where those spaces are going and make sure the infrastructure is actually shown on the engineering drawings that we're getting at the same time as we're getting the construction drawings for how the roads and the drainage and everything's going to be going in. I mean, it makes sense from the developer's point of view to plan it, get it in right from the word go, rather than dig up the roads later, which clearly would be not a very good way to go.
I would suggest a new parking census, possibly, to see how many cars we have, how many people are actually putting their cars in the garages, and especially going to new estates where they have very few garages, and most people are not using them. I don't know where you got 50%. It must have been in one street that actually had it. If I go to most of the streets I've seen locally, they don't. And that number is continually floated out as something, and I don't think it's realistic in this day and time about what's going on.
Perfectly valid points, but we do, as Judy said, we have to deal with policy as it exists.
May I suggest a new one?
Yes, but maybe not in the chamber today. Gary.
Thank you again. I think parking policy, our parking standard policy, is definitely an issue, but I think that's for another day and another place. I mean, Rachel is right in the point she makes. But again, we're getting back to climate emergency. You made the point about the provision of electric charging points where possible during the construction phase. I would add one fairly general point, and that is the developers in Crest and Legal and General, as developers, have been very good in the relationship with the local town and parishes. Finchampstead, Barkham and Arborfield parish councils and ward members meet them regularly, and they discuss all the development aspects that are going on. So you probably find a lot of the issues you would find elsewhere have been dealt with by then, and hence that might be the reason why there's no objection from any source. My only area of concern is well, it's twofold really. One is the Relief Road or the new road. The Observer Way Arborfield Relief Road has been successful and is very good, but the downside of it is it's subject to a lot of speeding and noise and problems, and it is affecting the residents at both ends. But that will be looked at. But with respect to the Relief Road through this development, it's going past houses all of the way. And my only concern would be that I would ask the officers with the developers to look at traffic calming, be it speed cameras or whatever available opportunities there are for them to be able to do something to make sure the traffic can be calmed for the sake of the residents in the area. The other thing, we had a block of flats burned down which is actually on that road, and it was, I don't know the reason for it, but speculation was it may have been solar panels in the roof. So I would just ask that that with respect to solar panels on buildings, that concern is given in case this sort of problem may occur again. But I think the development is progressive and worth supporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I think there were comments rather than questions. And I do agree with you, the importance of the applicants and our planning officers having a good relationship with the town and parish council is absolutely essential. Pauline.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a quick question for Judy. Are these estate roads being built to a standard that we're going to be adopting them?
They will be, yes. So we've got, I believe it's on the outline planning consent, we've got highway construction details conditions. So we'll get full chance to do a technical review before they're constructed. It's my understanding that the applicant probably wants to offer them up for adoption. They've done that at phase 1 at Hogwart. So we've had the section 38 agreement signed there, and actually we secured quite a lot of electric vehicle charging spaces in that phase. So yeah, we're looking forward to continuing good working relationship.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. I see nobody making other proposals, so we go to the recommendation, which must be on page 76. Can I see those in favour of approving this application? Are there any against? That application is approved. The next application is 136 Clifton Road, Wokingham, and it's the first of 3 applications for Simon Taylor this evening. Good evening, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Just loading up the screen for you. Is that available for you, Dale?
Yep.
Thank you. The application 211045 is a council application. It involves the conversion of a garage property owned by the council adjacent to Embrook local centre to be converted into a living carers living room for them to support the existing resident or the proposed resident in the building. So they will stay overnight, but this garage is intended for the use of the resident as alternative living room respite. There are 2 resident objections from neighbouring properties in relation to air source heat pump, which form part of the application. The council's health officers looked at that, and there's no concerns with the noise levels arising from that. In any event, it's permitted development. There is, as part of the application, 2 parking spaces in front of the property, which is compliant. The only other change to the building is a new window, which is acceptable with character grounds. There's no specific conditions, and the recommendation is for approval. Chair.
Thank you. No speakers, members, over to you. Doesn't appear to be anybody who wishes to speak, in which case I go straight to the recommendation on page 121. Those in favour of approving this application, please show. Any against? The application is approved. Thank you. And an ultimate application is Hatchgate Farm in Hurst, and it's Simon back a bit sooner than perhaps expected.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for a new agricultural barn, 1,470 square metres at Hatchgate Farm, which forms part of a larger agglomeration of farms owned by Belcher Farms. There's 6,000 cattle, 5,000 sheep operated across 170 hectares. They've had approval, as you can see on the aerial view here, in recent years in 2015, 2016 and 2018 for a collection of 5 barns. The 6th one will be located in the red line area. It's equivalent, slightly smaller in footprint to the existing building to its immediate east. It's intended to be used for the housing of storage of hay, machinery and lambing when the lambing season arises. It's open-sided on 3 sides, on one side, so to provide weather protection. There were no parish council objections, there was no resident objections and no consultee objections. The primary concerns or issues are the justification for the scheme. They have provided justification in terms of demonstrating the need for additional coverage. The existing buildings you can see there are used to house cattle, and they were returned back to the original plan. There is an existing collection of buildings to the north, which is the original farm buildings and the original farm homestead, which are no longer fit for purpose. They're either already occupied for other purposes or they've got low head heights, proportions don't allow for machinery. So and there are distances to the distance between these buildings and the main area for where the cattle are stored is prohibitive as well. The only concerns raised are the landscaping. So the building will be visible from the laneway in this photo here and from the entrance. There were conditions for existing landscaping to be implemented along the line of this fence here, which was never implemented. So that will be relocated, if I go back to the plan, around the outside of the red line plan. The only other concern being Berkshire Archaeology have raised concerns about its location and the potential for disturbance of archaeological finds. At the time of the site inspection, there is, as you can see in the photo, there was some groundworks already occurring, so there is potential for some disturbance, but works have ceased in that time, and there is still a condition requiring further evaluation works. So subject to a condition for landscape screening, the recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Again, there are no speakers. So members, any comments? Gary, please.
I just can't understand, why is it not being dealt with through permitted development?
I haven't looked into that. I think it might be the overall size. I think it might be limited to 1,000 square metres. It is defined as a major development, the reason being why it's come to committee. So if it's a major development, I'm pretty sure it's not permitted development.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And sorry, almost also might be the height of it. It is a fairly high building. It's 5.5 metres high.
I think it's actually 10,000 square metres, isn't it? The trigger for a major says 1,000 on page 141. Anyway, Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. I have no objections to the application, and clearly, as Simon said, the applicant's justified places of need, the construction of this additional barn. I just have a residual concern that should in the future this barn no longer be required, I imagine this would set precedent for other built forms on the site, including possibly residential. Am I correct in that, or am I worrying unnecessarily?
Ordinarily, we do apply a condition for its demolition if it's no longer in use. That hasn't been applied in this case. There is a demonstrated need for this development. I guess I could look into applying that condition if you felt that was appropriate.
I think it would reassure me if we did, but even with demolition, has this established a precedent for other built forms on the site? If an agricultural building is no longer required, does that provide a justification for other built forms, including residential?
This would have to be another planning application, Stephen, wouldn't it?
It would indeed have to be another application, but I'm just trying to clarify whether I've got this right or wrong, that we could effectively, in the future, if this became redundant for its current use, find ourselves with an application for housing, which would be very difficult to refuse because there'd be a precedent established. I'm just really trying to clarify whether I've got that right or not.
Is the concern that this building would be used for residential purposes?
Not Simon, that the building itself would be used, but if it could be shown that the building was no longer required, would it be possible to construct a new building on the site? I mean, it would obviously require planning permission, but would there be an assumption that it would be given planning permission because there'd been a building there before?
I guess every application is on its own merits, but this has a demonstrated need for agricultural purposes. So unless it was for agricultural purposes in the future for a new building, I'm not sure anything other than agricultural building would be approved in this location.
Okay, thanks very much. That reassuring.
Thank you, Steve. Nobody else? Okay. If there's no alternative proposal, then go to the recommendation on page 142. Can I see those in favour of the approving the application? Any against? That's approved. And the last application is former Showcase Cinema car park and other things. And it's Simon again.
Thank you, Chair. Application 211634 involves the change of use of the existing park and ride to the north of the Showcase Cinema site. The park and ride came into existence as part of the Showcase development. The park and ride was subject to a legal agreement allowing the council to use it for a parking and the bus collection area. It ceased to be in existence in the last 5 or 6 years. Primary issues being the flooding of the location and the existence of an existing facility at Winnash train station, which provided much more convenient access for the train users. This application will be for the use for Class B8 storage. It includes a welfare cabin in the form of a shipping container of the sort. It will be located in this location here underneath the overpass. So it is fairly well screened from the road and elevated on the site away from the flood zone 3. Also includes fencing. That is the palisade type fencing, which would be the green on the plan that you can see here. The red is a closed bordered fencing, so the red adjoins the roadway, and the green is set back off the road. There's a there's a public right of way leading along the western side of the site that runs along the River Loddon. You could see it through here. There are 7 submissions against the proposal, all from properties across the Loddon in Colemanmore Lane. Parish Council, there's 3 adjoining. There's 3 parish councils, 2 for the site and 1 adjoining. They primarily raise concerns about flooding and the loss of trees. Resident concerns are about name or amenity from the use of the building. So the primary issues can be summarised as the principle of development, so redundant use is being brought back into use. There's job creation provided by the application, and it's providing activation of the site. So the MPPF is fully supportive of adaptive reuse of the site. It's well connected to road networks, the A3290 and the M4 within close proximity, also the train station. So it's a very sustainable site. The character issues are limited to the fencing and the welfare cabin. As I've noted, the welfare cabin's fairly well screened. The fencing will be along the frontage of the site here, so it will be a visible element to the structure. But on balance, there's with some screening from the landscaping and along the western boundary, it does sit in behind the existing landscaping, predominantly behind the landscaping. And where there is removal of landscaping, that will be replaced and enhanced as part of a landscaping condition and required to be negotiated with the public rights of way officer for future upgrades of this right of way along the site. The only other concern being the storage across the site. It is limited to 5 metres. The applicant did seek an increased height of 8 metres. 5 metres was considered appropriate because of the change in level of the site is upwards of 5.5 a metre at the bottom end, but up to 2.5 metres at the top end. And with a 2 metre fence, it was fairly well screened from the street. Flooding was raised by several residents and by the parish council. Most of the site is flood zone 3. Flood zone 2 is up in the southeastern corner here, where the welfare cabin will be. There's no issues with flooding in the council's view because there's an evacuation plan and the palisade fence will allow water flows through the site, and there's no change in the vulnerability of the site being a change from transport use to a storage use. So there's conditions relating to landscaping and details of compliance with the arboricultural method statement, and planning balance, it weighs in favour of the development because of the MPPF supporting this kind of development, and that outweighs any impacts on resident amenity or character issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. A couple of speakers. First of all, Christian Lee, who is the agent, please. Good evening.
Hello there. Just checking you can see and hear me all right?
Yes. Yep.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Good. So good evening. Yes, my name's Christian Lee. I'm a chartered town planner. I've worked in the area for around 25 years, and I know the application site well. I was a student at Reading University some 30 years ago, and I used to also live in Woodley, very close to the site. So I'm pleased to see the recommendation to approve permission. This follows a long and productive pre-application process with your officers last year. This raised no objection to the principle in using the site, and based on officers' advice, we commissioned the necessary technical studies and the reports to address the key matters of flooding, drainage and access. We've also been in close discussions with officers to ensure that there are suitable controls over the use of the land. There has to be a balance to enable the productive and viable use of this woefully underused piece of land and the protection of amenity. The land is of course dominated by the A329 flyover, the Baderway and the elevated railway line, visually and audibly. We're restricting the hours of use and the storage of items on the land. We're also having new planting on the boundaries of the land and retaining the existing trees and planting. There's only very limited tree removal is planned in order to erect the fence. The fence is obviously necessary to make the site secure. There's new planting to compensate for that. Councillors should also know that my client's willingness to work proactively with the council extends to his full support for improvements to rights of way. The council have an agreed scheme to upgrade the Loddon footpath to be a wider bridleway. This is across my client's property, and so requires him to give up land, and he's happy to do this for both wider community interests and it also improves connectivity to the site for his staff to arrive by foot or cycle. And further discussions are underway with the council and Network Rail to provide a completely new footpath across his retained land to the south of the site, linking the bridleway with Winnersh Triangle Station. Again, this supports the benefit of the community to improve access to his site by foot and train for its employees. Of course, this improved access does emphasise the need for a secure boundary fence. The land's been unused for many years. It's a waste of previously developed land within the settlement boundary. The flooding and noise severely limits potential uses, but the proposed storage is compatible with the site's limitation, along with the excellent access to the road network. It's an ideal site for my client, good links by footpath and rail, and it brings a viable commercial use to the area and new jobs. I therefore ask that you support the recommendation to approve, subject to the suggested conditions which have been agreed with the officers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker is Councillor Prue Bray, member for Winnersh. Good evening, Prue.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. I don't want to stand in the way of you going with the officer recommendation to approve this application, because I do think most concerns about trees and light and noise and rights of way have been addressed. But I want to ask you to consider adding an informative. So this site floods. That doesn't have to prevent it being used for storage in the way envisaged, because I think it's well understood that there is a risk of flooding and there is a flood warning system available, which is great. But there is one thing that I feel the need to draw the applicant's attention to. So one of the flooding incidents on this site in 2007 was catastrophic. A large number of vehicles had to be written off. A lot of people did get the flood warnings and did move their cars in time, but some did not. And some could not, even though they got the warning. And that was because while their cars were parked in an area of the car park that had not yet flooded, they were effectively marooned there. They could not be driven out because to get to the access, they had to cross a lower section of the car park, which was already flooded, blocking their route out. So their cars couldn't be moved, and eventually they ended up in the water and had to be written off. I would hate to see vehicles stranded and having to be written off again in the same way. So I would like an informative added to the permission, so that advising that for any flood evacuation, they need to take account of the fact that floodwater might block the route out to the access road while parts of the site still remain above water, because it's not at all clear from the report that that is understood. The access road is fine, but if you can't get to it, you're stuck. So that's it. Please approve the application by all means, but consider adding that informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Prue. I'm sure Mr. Lee's heard your words anyway, but I'll open it up to members. Come to Bill first. He's got most of the application site is in Loddon Ward, and then come to Rochelle after.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just one point of an error in the report. It's actually the residents that you would have spoken to are actually in Coleman's Road and not Coleman's Lane. That's actually in the pack. It's mentioned at 159 as Coleman's Road. In fact, the officer mentioned it as Coleman's Road. It's sorry, it is Coleman's Road, not Coleman's Lane. That's just one point. Along with Wokingham Woodley Town Council, they support this application, but I have spoken to a number of the residents in Coleman's Road who could be affected by this. And a number of issues came up, obviously. There was the issue over lighting. That it says in the report here that there will be no prohibiting any external lighting. And it was pointed out to me that this is a commercial construction site, and would this include any tower lighting, temporary tower lighting that can often be used on site? So they would not want that to be used. Not that it's not going to be installed, that it could be a temporary issue. Also, there's a point about stored chemicals, not storing chemicals, and it states chemicals. Would this include diesel oil for the vehicles and perhaps a lubricating oil for the vehicles? Would that be stored on the site? Because obviously that could cause a problem with possible contamination to the Loddon. So would there be tanks there? That was another question that I would like answered. Tree removal, well, I think that came up, but that's obviously been dealt with in the pack. And I think most of the residents now have actually seen that and are quite happy if that's the case. Operating hours 7-7 during the week and 10-5. I did have comments that 7 o'clock was a little bit earlier. They would rather see 8 o'clock. Bearing in mind most people now working from home, they're not getting up quite so early. And the issue on flooding, I think everybody who knows that site would agree that it does flood more frequently than every 5 years. Just one question on page 174 and 175, items 29. There was a request to have 24-hour parking so that the vehicles returning could park at any time rather than load or unload, but just park the vehicles. And it says that condition 5 restricts this. Is that a definite that there won't be the allowance after 7 o'clock at night or 5 o'clock at weekends for vehicles to enter this site for parking? And I'd like that to be answered. Thanks very much. But other than that, I support this application.
Simon? Not Simon, Judy, perhaps.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the tower lighting, my view is that the condition would not allow tower lighting. In any event, it's a Class B8 use, so the operation of it, I don't envisage it happening from the conditions. So it could be strengthened, but I don't think it's necessary. The stored chemicals, I guess I haven't clarified with the applicant whether or not it would include diesel or oils, but I would, in any event, add that, extend that condition to include that, because they made it clear that the only things being stored on the site are heavy machinery and plants. So I would envisage that the filling up of the machines to with petrol or diesel would happen off site. The hours of use from 7 a.m. generally support that type of Class B8 use. So the operation, they need to be out on site fairly early. They did ask for overnight use and it was felt that it was inappropriate. So 7 a.m. in this case is appropriate given the impact on the surrounding area is limited. And the opening hours, if you do read condition 5, it does note the opening hours of the site, including any operational movement and machinery. So that limits it to between 7 and 7, Monday to Friday, and 10 and 5. So I think that condition covers that point.
What was the distance to the nearest residential?
80 metres to the west across the river.
Okay. Bill, did you want to come back on that?
Oh, that's fine. Thanks very much.
Okay, Rochelle.
I walk my dog there on a regular basis, so I'm quite well aware of this site. It does get quite damp at times and quite wet at times. That's a polite understatement, I think. I would advise them to make sure they park their vehicles in places where it doesn't get quite damp. I've seen a lot of water there on more than a few occasions. And I usually walk down the right of way there with my dog on a regular basis. I think it's a great use for the site, as long as they don't store chemicals, as long as they don't have anything. Storing wood, I wouldn't suggest they put wood down on the bottom there. It's going to get very soggy wood. I don't know what they're going to be putting down and what they're going to be doing what kind of materials they're leaving there. But it is an overflow for the Loddon, and it is a floodplain as far as that goes. It's one of the places where the water stays, so it doesn't flood the houses on Colemanmore Road. And I've seen more than a few flooded houses across the road as I'm walking my dog. So just be careful where you're going. But it's great use for the land. We originally suggested a water park there more than anything else because it's so wet so often. And the borough was going to use it as a temporary park and ride when they were working on the other park and ride. But they're not going to be doing that. They decided that. It's a great site for a builder's yard, yes. That's about all I can say.
Thank you, Rochelle. Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I note the proposal seeks to bring the site back into use with all the attendant benefits. I've also noted Simon's comments with reference to an evacuation plan, and I'd like to sort of probe this a little bit further, also in light of Councillor Bray's suggestion. Can you confirm how many entrance/exit points there are to the site, and whether their positioning would be sufficient to enable safe evacuation in the event of sudden and severe flooding? Picking up on Councillor Bray's point, I would suggest that we consider, rather than an informative relating to or regarding an evacuation plan, that we strengthen that in terms of a condition that there be an acceptable evacuation plan to minimise the kinds of risks, damage that Councillor Bray alluded to. Also on the issue of flooding, can officers confirm whether the nature of the proposed use could have any additional impacts on the likelihood of flooding, either on this site or, importantly, elsewhere, in the neighbouring vicinity? I do have two other questions which I'd like to ask after I've received response to this.
Thank you. It might assist if I just share my screen for a second just to understand the flood zones. The dark blue, if it's up on the screen now, the dark blue is flood zone 3 and the lighter blue is flood zone 2. The cabin will be down in this area here, so that'll be outside of the flood zone 3. The only access is through the main entrance up here. So it is noted that access will be through flood zone 2 along here, the only way in and out. So that was discussed with the flood risk assessment. They did discuss how they would deal with it. A lot of the equipment is quite expensive, so it's been in their own interest to be fully abreast of weather patterns and the likelihood of flooding. So they'll be subscribed to the EA flood warning system, and they're in their own interest to remove any valuable equipment that would be subject to flooding off the site well before the flooding occurs. The rest of it, I'm told, is mostly waterproof and heavy enough that it won't be swept away. In addition, it's already been noted that it is a floodplain more than a flood flowed through the site. So it's not envisaged that there be any impediment to existing water flows through the site. The fence is open on the western side of the site to allow water flows to go through the site and for it to drain sufficiently. There's also no change to the existing ground. So the impervious areas and the impervious areas are all unchanged. So it's not envisaged to be any problem with that. So in terms of providing a condition for an evacuation plan, that can be provided, but I'm not of the view that it provides any assurance to the council or it's necessary for the council to impose that condition, whereas the issue lies with the applicant ensuring that their own insurance is in order and they don't incur costs associated with that. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Let's go back, Andrew, I think.
Yeah, I would still be interested to hear the views of other members on the proposal, to have a condition relating to or informative relating to an evacuation plan. I'm not sure that should just be left, to the applicant because there can be other third parties, who may be affected, by sudden and severe flooding on the site. My other two questions relate to the two informatives on pages 162 and 163. I note that the applicant's spokesperson referred to the applicant's very positive view of the supportive view of the public rights of way. I'm just wondering though whether those two informatives couldn't be conditions rather than informatives. I'd be interested in the reasoning, why they're informatives.
Which ones are you talking? Sorry.
This is on the bottom of page 162. Yeah. It's the Woodley footpath, public rights of way, and then the top of page 163, the consultation with the rights of way team. Yeah. Okay. And my final question regards roads and safety. And I'm just curious as to what the current speed limit is along this section of Beta Way. Presumably some of the vehicles using this site will be quite large. Could officers please just talk us through the road layout from the site to Beta Way, and do the speed limits in the proximity to roundabouts? I think there are two roundabouts. Raise any safety concerns? Thank you.
I can pick up on the bits about the speed limit and the layout. So the speed limit's 40 miles an hour, and the site access is obviously already established. So it's got a deceleration lane and an acceleration lane for the large vehicles to access and egress. So we're quite happy with the highway design.
Question about the those two informatives. Could they be conditioned?
So I'll jump in, Chair. The public right of way, as I understand it, is outside of the red line application site. I think it's in the blue land, so other land owned by the applicant. So the grant of this permission doesn't give them any rights for storage over that parcel of land. It's just an informative to remind them that they can't use it for storage.
Andrew?
And the informative at the top of page 163. Does your comment, Justin, apply to that informative 3 as well?
Just getting there. Yeah, that's right. Again, this permission doesn't grant rights to store on the public right of way.
Thank you. And could I just pick up on Judy's point? I misunderstood what was meant by the presence of an acceleration and a deacceleration lane. I am concerned, that there's a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit currently along this section of road. And again, given the nature of some of the vehicles that will be, accessing and leaving the site, I also understand that it's possible that numbers of people may already regularly be exceeding that speed limit on Beta Ray. So I'd like a little bit more sort of assurance, about the road safety issue.
Yeah, so what I meant by the deceleration lane and the acceleration lane is that the vehicles sort of heading, so it's a left in, left out access arrangement. So the vehicles will have to pull off the main stream of traffic heading north into a separate lane, which only goes to this site for a considerable amount of time before they actually then get into the site access. And similarly, leaving the site, they've got a good stretch to join the traffic. I think we need to remember as well that the site was originally a park and ride site, so it would have had buses coming out of it fairly frequently, and it would have been designed with slower speed vehicles in mind. Obviously with buses, they don't tend to have seat belts for passengers, so they do need to be pretty cautious about sort of stopping and starting quite suddenly. So so yeah, hopefully that explains a little bit further.
Okay, Andrew. Okay, Andrew. Okay, fine, thank you. Angus.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I do welcome the public rights of way improvements that are part of this or associated with this application. Now, I may be the only person on this committee thinking the way I'm about to say, but I am just amazed that anyone would want to park anything in flood zone 3. And I'm also amazed that the Environment Agency have not objected or even commented, despite the evidence it's a worse risk than when the original application was approved. And that's the reason that this council vacated it as a park and ride site. I'm concerned about contamination, were there to be a flood. I don't think it's anything that we could control, and therefore I cannot support this application.
Thank you, Angus. Gary.
Thank you. Angus has really stole my thunder in a way, but I'll start off by saying the report makes reference to tree removal is limited. Yet the condition 3 talks about doing a scheme of landscaping, but as members of the committee, we have no idea what any of that means. There's a couple of references in the report to anecdotal evidence to flooding, yet it's pretty clear that it's a lot more than anecdotal evidence. We've got very firm evidence of the amount of flooding that goes on there and the floods. And as Angus said, it is a zone 3. B8 condition gives an awful lot of scope to what can be put on that site. And I believe that there should be no storage of materials, pretty much as Bill mentioned diesel, but there should be no storage of any material that if it leaked into the Loddon would damage the habitat. and we've not covered that. So anything that's connected to B8 could be stored there. If flooding appears, it could flood into the Loddon and completely damage the whole environment there. The ecology on paragraph 42 makes no mention of it. And the Environment Agency talks of 1 in 20-year probability of flooding, which is 5%, which is one of the worst I've ever seen. So I can't vote on this item, but I would be very concerned unless there is a condition added to it that says no materials that could be damaging to the habitat in the event of a flood were stored on that site. Thank you.
Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Condition 9 intends to address that issue. If it's not watertight enough, I think we can expand that in consultation with the applicant just to confirm that there is only a proposal to store plant or machinery and nothing else. That's my understanding, and we can expand the prohibition of all the other types of uses to include diesel, oils, anything. So there's not intended to be any discharge of anything into the River Loddon at all. And I can strengthen that condition to make sure that's clear. There was a comment about the tree condition. I think there was minimal tree removal. The intention behind the condition is to seek enhancement of landscaping on the site, given it is a fairly it's a B8 use and it's a fair amount of hard standing on the site, so that would enhance the site from its existing use.
I would add, Chairman, that B8 covers a multitude of sins, and I would ask that the officers look at what shows in B8. I mean, if the condition of B8 allows for all sorts of contaminants and stuff to be stored there, then it would be inappropriate. Thank you.
Just to add, I think it might be easier if condition 9 is reworded to specify what can be stored on the site, and then it removes any other possibility of anything else being stored on the site.
That would be welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Sam, please.
I just want to follow on from what Angus said. The fact that it's in a flood zone 3 and the fact that, you know, my concern is that, you know, it'll end up having red diesel stored there, and worst case scenario, there's a flood and you get red diesel pouring into the river, and, you know, there'll be a big ecological disaster. So on that basis, I can't support this.
I think Simon's indicated he would strengthen condition 9 with our agreement to preclude those what you just described, Sam. I think that's right, Simon.
That's correct, yes. Yep.
Yes, okay. Pauline.
Thank you, Chairman. I was pleased, Judy, to see the commitment to improving the rights of way. I couldn't find the route of the proposed enhanced cycleway and link to Winner's Triangle on the plan. I just want to make sure it's not that it's appropriate, that it's not being sort of put in between two very high fences with little wiggle room, and that the sort of design of it works. But I couldn't find it on the plan. That was the first thing. I wonder if you could just point it out on the plan. And the second thing was on page 176. At the top, it says the site is conveniently located at the on-ramp of the A3290. Now, that on-ramp hasn't been used since it ceased to be a park and ride, and we ceased to send buses up there to go to Reading. Does this imply that that on-ramp is going to be reopened? I mean, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that, and it's got hydraulic bollards on it, but it isn't clear why that particular on-ramp has been mentioned. And I wasn't very sure whether all the access was meant to be through what used to be the car access to the park and ride, and whether there was any likelihood of vehicles going up the on-ramp and on the A329M. And in a way, if not, why not?
I'll jump in ahead of Judy. When I refer to the on-ramp, I'm referring to the Beta Way, which joins up to the A329 through the roundabout to the north. So there's no proposal for the actual on-ramp. I note that indiscreet or the error in that the reference there. The public right of way is something that's being developed by the council in the near future, so it doesn't form part of this application. It's outside of the red line area, but the applicant is fully on board in terms of negotiating with the public rights of way team and the council in terms of widening it to and landscaping it to suit the council's needs.
So could I just come back and check that includes the link that goes towards Winners Triangle that then will be intersecting with a new crossing to get across that road with the right displays and everything to be able to put the crossing there. That's in the plan, is it, Judy? And then the other question again is, why not that on-ramp?
So can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, the new crossing is shown just to the south of the site. So it's proposed to be a toucan crossing, so it'll take pedestrians and cyclists straight across the set of signals that are there at the moment to get them down to the railway station. So that'll cut the travel times from the site a bit. I don't actually have any other sort of details on that scheme. It's a different sort of section of the highways team that are progressing the rest of the route. I've just been quite heavily involved in the design of the toucan crossing and make sure it's got, you know, the sight lines and, you know, the safety audit issues are all addressed and so on. And the access to the site, I think Simon did show earlier, it's just coming sort of in where I'm sort of indicating on the screen at the moment and back out again there.
So Judy, I'm just curious as to why we're not, rather than taking traffic onto the A329M via several sets of traffic lights and a roundabout, and as Andrew described, a sort of constrained area, why we're not using that ramp?
I'm not entirely sure where we're talking about here. I have to admit, Simon, I don't know if you can help me.
Sorry, on the left-hand side of the A329M Reading bound, there is a dedicated bus ramp which has spring-loaded bollards on the bottom, and which is on the plans.
Yeah.
And when Simon said it's close to the on-ramp, that's the on-ramp I thought about, because that's an on-ramp. The roads are not really an on-ramp, and I'm just curious to know why we're not using it, given it's there.
Well, I mean, I think the access that the applicant's proposing is there as well and has been sort of assessed to be sort of acceptable. They want to put in, you know, some site security arrangements at the site access, which are going to be manned and so on. And, you know, we've assessed the proposal that's been put forward and we're quite happy with it.
Opportunity missed, possibly. Thank you.
Stephen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't really want to add terribly much to what has been said already by colleagues, but I think the concerns of Sam and perhaps even Angus might be met if we were to pose a revised condition 9 stipulating what can be stored on the site rather than what can't be stored, which would be agreed by the chair in consultation with, may I say, both local members who are sitting on this committee, Bill and Rochelle, in other words.
Yes, I'll be happy with that. I'll second your suggestion, Stephen. Is there anything else? Perhaps I can take a vote on that. Members in favour of that? Dealt with, that's condition 9. Thank you.
Chairman, just on that point, the other thing to think about is if we've got vehicles with tanks, they usually have air vents. If the water gets reasonably high, you might find fuel comes out of tanks as well. So that just needs to be borne in mind.
What was the last bit?
You know, you're saying condition it to only have storage of certain things, but if you've got a tank on a vehicle with fuel in it, there's no guarantee it's going to stay there if the water's high enough.
Okay. So, Andrew, you were suggesting two of the informative should be conditions. I think that perhaps you dropped that, did you?
Yeah, I'm no longer seeking the two informatives to be changed to conditions. I'm satisfied with the explanation that was given. to that. I would still like us to consider a condition relating to an evacuation plan. I take on board what has been said tonight, but I don't believe that it's simply something that should be left to the applicant. Because I believe that there are third parties who also have an interest in this as well. So I would like a condition relating to an agreed evacuation plan.
Okay, do you have a seconder? Okay, I just realised I forgot to come back to you, Rochelle. Do you mind if I go to the vote on this? So is it clear what Andrew is proposing, that the applicant's obliged to create an exit strategy? Was that the right word? Evacuation strategy from the site. Consider those in favour of that, please. Are you not? It's not clear what we're voting on.
Can I just ask what Andrew thinks is the third party, because this is a contractor's vehicles and contractor's equipment, and it would seem to me that he's going to, in his own interest, he's going to safeguard those. I don't see that there's any need for any further action.
Well, you're just indicating how you might vote, I think, Bill.
Yeah.
Is it clear what?
May
it's
I,
an evacuation strategy that Andrew's proposing.
I understand the lack of clarity in that phrase, third parties. I would see that as including visitors to the site and also employees to the site. So they would be included under that umbrella term, third parties. So they're not directly involved, as it were, that could still be impacted significantly.
You mean their vehicle?
They're not the company. Yeah.
You mean the people or their vehicle?
Both. Both. Yeah.
So I think it's still you're proposing an evacuation plan. Yep. Okay. And who seconded it? Rochelle. Okay.
We should have
is it clear what we're voting on now, members?
We should have an evacuation plan for the site, for the people, and for everything there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's vote on it. Those in favour, please show. No, I'm voting against. Okay. Thank you. That's approved. So you want to come back, Rochelle, please.
Sorry, I can talk about people accelerating up that. I did have to write off a car where I got hit when I was trying to go into the park and ride and stopped to let a bus in, and a Range Rover just decided to destroy my car I was driving. Second of all, I can talk about, there are two other exits that everybody seems to have forgotten about that's under the railway that goes into the showcase car park. Those are another exits they can go out through. There are bollards there, but bollards can be removed.
Sorry, what's the question?
It wasn't a question. It was just the fact that, yes, they do speed up that road. And yes, that they had crushed my car. So yes, I can definitely say that it does occur. And second of all, I've said that they forgot when they were talking about, when the officer was talking about the only other exit was the ramp onto the A329M. There are also two other ones under the railway that go into the showcase car park that are just have bollards on them. So there's also another possibility of an exit for them.
Okay. Right, we have approved Andrew's condition, and we have approved modification to condition 9 to be determined by Simon and me.
And the local members on the committee.
Whatever it was, you've got that in there. Okay, so I think that covers everything. If nobody else wants to speak, is anyone wish to propose a refusal? If not, we'll go to the recommendation on page 160. There were those two with the new condition and the amended or the prospective amended condition. Those in favour of approving the application, please show. Yep. Those against? Okay, abstain. Yep, that is approved. Thank you very much. And that brings to then the application. We've got the we have no preemptive in the supplementary planning document. There's no preemptive site visit. What's the matter? Are we up there? Oh. Are we off there? Yep. Right, can be silly now, off there. I'm just looking at page 3 of the supplementary. Members, please, when you've finished. There are only 2 appeals. Or was it 3? 3 appeals. 2 appeals. Both dismissed. Well done, officers. 100%. Excellent work. Thank you very much. I think that's the end. Thank you for your forbearance and good night.